It is Bitcoin Wednesday.
Bitcoin Wednesday, the digital currency revolution in the Netherlands. Register using the link on bitcoinwednesday.com.
Hi Andreas, thank you very much for agreeing to come and speak with us. I also would like to thank the audience also for coming out and supporting this. What we're doing is we're all actually activists for the digital currency revolution, and it's really very positive step that we're all gathering here, and we're hoping to really spark a very open, transparent, and very informational or educational series of conversations about the possible importance of this technology for society as well as the Dutch economy. And thank you very much for everyone who has sent questions in here. And before we get started, just like to say, we will call some of you up to ask your questions directly into the microphone here. Please keep the questions as short as possible. We only have a limited amount of time to go through a lot of questions. And the idea is that we'll be answering these questions to get at a relatively high level, so that we can get a general sense, and also to be able to distribute the video that we're making of this to interested parties within the Dutch government. So the very first series of questions are going to be relatively general questions that are of interest to our government. And when we're finished with this video, when we package that, we will be sending that to them. And hopefully that will be the first step in an ongoing dialogue, which you are all participating in as members of the audience, or people who have contributed questions, or who will be asking questions. So when you do come to the microphone or ask a question, briefly state your name, and very briefly give the question and nothing else. There are a couple of exceptions where people will mention their affiliation, and you'll see for yourself why we've done that and the reason for that. So thank you very much, Andreas. We give you the floor.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, can everyone hear me? Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I wish I could be there in person. Amsterdam is one of my favorite cities in Europe, and I really wish I could visit again. So just a quick check. I wanted to find out how many people in the audience are new to Bitcoin. All right, a few people there.
10. Yeah.
All right. And how many people in the audience own some Bitcoin at this time? Oh, great. Very good. Very good. So I wanted to thank you all for having me at this event. My name is Andreas Antonopoulos. I am the author of Mastering Bitcoin, and Bitcoin's #1 fan is probably the best title I can give myself. I've been involved in Bitcoin now for 3 years, and it's a technology that really excites me. It excites me as an engineer. It excites me politically, it excites me socially, and it's something that I'm very interested in and talking about to as many people as possible. And so I've spent the last 3 years working full-time in the Bitcoin space, doing a lot of public talks like this one, as well as writing a book about Bitcoin. So what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is something really unique. It seems at first glance, if you look at Bitcoin, a lot of people will think that Bitcoin is simply a form of PayPal or a digital payment system, or perhaps a digital currency like the currencies you find in games or casinos or things like that. In fact, the first time I heard about Bitcoin, it was in relation to some casino, and I thought it was some form of digital casino chips. And I ignored it because I didn't realize the importance of this technology. Bitcoin is much more than all of that combined. At first glance, Bitcoin appears to be a currency, but it's not just a currency. It is a technology platform and an invention that allows two individuals to exchange value across the internet without having met each other, without having to establish trust in each other, and without any intermediary or counterparty getting in the way of the transaction. Bitcoin isn't just one more currency in the world of currencies. It's not a national currency. It's not just a form of money. Bitcoin is the first transnational currency, the first global currency, and also the first completely decentralized digital currency. What Bitcoin allows is a world without borders where economic transactions between individuals can occur instantaneously and at very low cost. It brings the principles of internet connectivity, communication, freedom of expression, and freedom of association to money. It is the first time that we have seen innovation happen to the banking industry. For the last 50 years, the banking and financial services industry has had the ability to veto new entrants and new competition, using regulation as a means to stop competition, and promoting technology from the 1950s, credit cards, for example, as the latest cutting-edge technology. In fact, banking and finance has barely innovated in the last 50 years. Instead, what we get is a world in which, at the time of the internet, banks operate Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, at least in my country, where transacting between two individuals involves sending a paper check or transmitting a wire transfer that takes 3 days to cross the globe, if you're lucky, where getting access to your funds can be delayed by 3 to 5 business days, and where exorbitant fees are the norm. The banking industry has been able to get away with this because they do not face any serious competition, because they are able to attain a monopoly over most national systems through regulation. Bitcoin changes that. It will do to the traditional relationship between money and people what Skype did to long-distance phone calls. You know, if a decade ago, if I was trying to do what I'm doing right now, which is speaking to you by remote video conference from the other side of the planet, I would have to probably pay AT&T by the minute. There might be on the side of my laptop a little slot where I could put coins every 30 seconds in order to pay for this video conference. But fortunately, the internet changed the relationship of power between telephone companies and people. And now, again, the internet is going to change that relationship between banks and people, and also between governments and people. Bitcoin enables us to unite the world economically, to extend the reach of an individual to be the same as that of a multinational corporation, an individual who can transmit money cheaply and instantaneously anywhere in the world. But again, Bitcoin is much more than that. Underlying it is a platform and decentralized system that can be used to replace many hierarchical, centralized, counterparty-based institutions. For example, Bitcoin can be used to implement stock markets, stock exchanges, bond payments, lending, peer-to-peer lending, crowdfunding, public offerings and share offerings, the organization of elections, whether private elections within shareholders or even on a broader scale. All of these things are possible because Bitcoin provides a platform of trust that is not controlled or owned by anyone, but is based on a series of mathematical rules called consensus, which emerge from the participation of everyone on the network. Bitcoin diffuses the power of trust just like the internet diffused the power of publication and communication and gave power to more people while removing the power from centralized locations. And Bitcoin will do this with a platform of trust in ways that we cannot yet imagine. It can affect not just economic systems, but many forms of social organization. And at its core, Bitcoin operates on a completely transnational level. Like the internet, it doesn't even see borders. Every person who connects to the Bitcoin network is treated as an equal peer. Bitcoin is a neutral platform that doesn't care whether the source or the destination of the money is an individual in a first world country with access to incredible resources, or a farmer in a developing nation or a third world country in a rural setting using a small text-based messaging system in order to communicate via Bitcoin with the world. Bitcoin doesn't care if you're a bank, a multinational, or individual. If you're trying to transmit $1 or $1 million, it is a neutral platform that enables these transactions regardless. And with that, it brings the power of desktop banking and mobile banking to everyone without constraints, without limitations. The promise of Bitcoin is not just the promise of making shopping easier within the developed world. It's not about replacing Visa or MasterCard or PayPal. It's not about doing online commerce or buying a cup of coffee in Amsterdam. It's not about making those things easier. What it's really about is bringing the power of international banking to 4 to 6 billion people who have never had access to powerful international banking. According to the World Bank, some 2.5 billion people have no access to banking whatsoever. They live in cash-based or barter-based societies. An additional 4 billion people have limited access to banking. Banking that can only be used in the local currency, banking that cannot be used internationally, with very limited access to international liquidity and credit, lending, or other institutions of finance that we are accustomed to. I can open a bank account and a brokerage account and be trading on the Tokyo Stock Exchange tomorrow in yen, and neither my bank nor my government will get in the way or try to stop me from doing that. I will have very few limitations to do that. That is a position of privilege that a very small percentage of the population of this planet have today. Bitcoin brings with it the promise of extending global, instantaneous financial services to every citizen, every person, everyone on this planet, with technology as simple as text messaging phones, or with a very inexpensive smartphone such as a $25 Android. And this promise really is what is going to drive the development of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin solves problems that are enormous, problems that have prevented the spread of banking and financial services from many of the furthest remote places on this planet. And by solving these problems, Bitcoin creates an enormous possibility for people to connect with one another. And people will not be stopped because for many people in the world, this is not about making shopping easier or reducing the cost of a transaction or buying your cup of coffee with a single tap and pay and saving some time in the checkout counter. This is about freedom and control over money. In places where the governments are hostile, the banks are organized criminals, and people have very few opportunities to invest in the future of their children, in the next generation, in healthcare, sanitation, food, and security. Bitcoin gives them the power to do that without controls, without constraints, and without a series of intermediaries trying to steal their money at every turn. And so that's why I'm excited to be in this space. I think bringing the principles of the internet to money is a lifetime opportunity. And for those people who are in Bitcoin today, this represents a front seat in the making of history. And I'm very glad to be part of this. And it is a huge privilege to be able to work with this incredible global community to bring the promise of individually controlled, free, fair, transparent money to the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andreas. And I just wanted to emphasize that we are all, by being here, by participating in Bitcoin Wednesday, by spreading the word, by sharing the information that we've learned here, and getting more people to come and to raise awareness within Dutch society, we are contributing to making history for Amsterdam, for the Netherlands, so that we can make this country and this city one of the international hubs for Bitcoin and for this technology. And I really want to thank Andreas for bringing that point, making that point clear. And now what we're going to do is go through some of the official questions that we've been given by the interested parties within the Dutch government. There are a lot of questions, so in order to get through them, you'll see that we're really going to only answer them on a high level, maybe just a couple of minutes for each question. But it's really just the beginning, so we hope to go into much more detail in the months ahead. This is only number 22 of Bitcoin Wednesday, and I hope to see you all when we do 222. We're going to be here still doing this, and you can bring your children and your grandchildren as well. So, having said that, let's start crying with the first question.
Okay, well, here's the first question. To gain some better understanding of the ecosystem, could you tell us what are the different types of parties using crypto tokens or offer products and services based on them? Could you understand? Oh, yeah, by the way.
That really depends on which country you're looking at, and it depends on how you're looking at Bitcoin. Now, we've got to understand that at the moment, Bitcoin is really in its very early stages. It's not that easy to use. It's complex technology, and it requires some complex concepts. So as a result, the truth is that a lot of the early adopters in Bitcoin are the technically literate, the people who adopt the technology the earliest, the nerds, the geeks, as me. And we tend to have an easier time absorbing rapid technological change and being exposed to these kinds of experimental technologies. However, what we're seeing is gradually Bitcoin is spreading in various places around the world and with various uses. We see Bitcoin being used in online commerce because it actually provides for a much better consumer experience. It allows people to buy things online very quickly and easily without exposing their private banking information or credit card information to intermediaries, and in a way that is much more secure than traditional credit card payments. We see Bitcoin being used increasingly for remittances, for immigrants to send money home to their families, replacing much more expensive alternatives such as Western Union, MoneyGram, and others like that. We see Bitcoin being used in import and export businesses as a faster way to send payments instead of wire transfers. We see Bitcoin being used to pay subcontractors, suppliers, and partners in multiple different countries because it facilitates international payments very, very effectively. We also see Bitcoin being used for a variety of individual uses, from buying coffee to buying t-shirts to all kinds of things like that. In different places, we will also see that Bitcoin is gradually being approached by various governments that are interested in seeing if they can use Bitcoin to accept payments for government services. It's interesting to see that in many countries, for example, they use various forms of electronic payments for public transportation that are very restrictive in their use and not very flexible. So we know that there are a number of governments interested in seeing how Bitcoin could be used to offer municipal services and local government services. Those are the kinds of uses we see today. But it's interesting to note that because it is still a very early stage of this technology, what we're seeing is a lot of the traditional uses of currency simply being replicated in Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin will get much more interesting as we see broader adoption when things that cannot be done with existing currencies and payment systems start being done with Bitcoin, including, for example, micropayments for creative content on the internet, which is not possible today, and various other forms of autonomous systems that can use Bitcoin directly, whether that's self-driving cars, perhaps, or automated hotel systems. And so we've barely scratched the surface of what types of uses Bitcoin might have.
Well, I think you answered my second question there. So the third one was, what will the ecosystem look like in like 12 months or maybe 3 years or 5 years?
I think it's important to understand that Bitcoin time is about 4 times faster than normal time, meaning 1 year in Bitcoin is about 4 years in most other technologies. The amount of development and innovation that has occurred just in the last year is absolutely breathtaking. And so I do not offer 5-year predictions on Bitcoin. I don't think I can even confidently make 3-year predictions on Bitcoin. For the next 12 months, I think what we're going to see mostly in Bitcoin is development of fundamental infrastructure services. We're at the stage in this currency where the most basic infrastructure needs to be built in order to make it easier for people to get Bitcoin, to earn Bitcoin for their labor, and to use Bitcoin in everyday circumstances. And that means Bitcoin exchanges, Bitcoin ATMs, and Bitcoin wallets.
Okay, thank you. The next question is by Richard.
Hi, I'm Richard Cole. I'm one of the board members of the Dutch Bitcoin Foundation. And I'd like to ask this question from this official question from the Dutch government. Please tell us, what are the different profiles of the various types of investors and users, and the types of financial products and services that are based on crypto tokens that they might be using?
Well, again, it's difficult to say at the moment. I think a lot of the early users at the moment are people who are involved in high technology. We're seeing a lot of investors interested in investing in startups in the Bitcoin space, and that's one of the most promising areas because that represents investment directly in innovation and technology research and development. That's the area that is generating jobs, and I think that's very interesting. We also see speculative investment. So there's a lot of people using Bitcoin as a speculative investment, trading Bitcoin on Bitcoin markets. That activity is generally very high risk because Bitcoin has extremely high volatility. And certainly we are seeing a lot of that going on. But it's not very interesting to me because it doesn't reflect the technology and the innovation. It's basically treating Bitcoin as a stock that can be traded in a stock market. And really, Bitcoin is too small to be a stock. It's too volatile, and that activity resembles gambling more than anything else. I hope that answers your question.
Certainly. I'd like to extend the question now. This is something that we've spoken about at Bitcoin Wednesday and within the stifting extensively. Please also tell us, what are the different profiles of the various users and the types of non-financial products and services based on crypto tokens that they are using? So non-financial.
We're beginning to see a lot of interesting uses of the blockchain technology in order to do secure registration of assets. So for example, and I think this would be a perfect example for Amsterdam, one of the projects that I've seen that has been of great interest to me is a project to create a registry for bicycles. So as an anti-theft mechanism for bicycles, I've heard that you have bicycles in Amsterdam.
One or two.
One or two. And so bicycle anti-theft activities, in many cities around the world, you can register your bicycle with a local police department and have them etch a serial number or stamp a serial number on the frame in order to protect it from theft. These systems are not very distributed, and they're relatively difficult to operate because they're highly centralized. Blockchain technologies allow you to do secure timestamp databases, and what that means is that you can take something like a bicycle registration, record it in the blockchain, and then be able to transfer the ownership of the bicycle using a standard Bitcoin-like transaction, where what you're transacting is not the value itself, but the use of a tiny amount of Bitcoin as a token of ownership, as a title of ownership of an asset. You could do this with bicycles, you could do it with cars, you could do it with houses to buy and sell a house, for example. What that would allow you to do is also to apply other techniques such as escrow to protect buyer and seller without having to expose them to the risk of a third-party escrow service. You can do automated escrow in Bitcoin without anyone taking custody of the funds. by using the network as the escrow service. There are many exciting possibilities around registration and timestamping offered by this technology.
Great. The next question is, what are the advantages and the risks for users and investors in crypto tokens?
The advantages are that Bitcoin and other crypto tokens offer a completely new security model, one that diversifies the risk by putting security in the hands of the end user. Now, we see in traditional financial services that when a centralized institution, like for example, a large retailer or bank, is hacked, that can lead to the compromise of millions and millions of credit cards or consumer identities and identifying information. So the systems that we use today are not very friendly to privacy. Bitcoin allows consumers to protect their privacy and to protect the security of their funds by spreading the security across all of the users. So to compromise millions of Bitcoin users, you have to attack millions of different computers. If the Bitcoin protocol is used correctly with its decentralized nature, it decentralizes risk. And that's a tremendous opportunity. Now, for investors, on the other hand, Bitcoin is a relatively risky investment at the moment. And we also see that there are other risks. For example, in many cases, we see companies trying to implement traditional banking models, centralized banking models on top of Bitcoin. If you have an organization that takes control of user funds and takes control of the private keys that control the funds, then what that organization is doing is they're building a bank. It's using Bitcoin, but it's still a bank. And if you have custodial control over users' money, that exposes those users to tremendous risk. Essentially, Bitcoin and the blockchain technology allow users to control their own money. But if you take that security model away and you create something that looks more like a bank, then that actually increases the risk for users, both in terms of privacy and in terms of hacks, embezzlement, and fraud. And we saw that repeatedly with examples like Mt. Gox in Japan and other exchanges that centralized control.
What are the advantages and the risks concerning the growth of a newly developing financial market around crypto tokens?
Well, a lot of these markets are very, I think, very exciting because they can represent a lot of innovation in technology. But I think the primary risk is that if you, again, as I said, if you take the security model of Bitcoin and you violate that security model and instead you take control of users' funds and centralize them, then some of the organizations that do that, they're not protected by the Bitcoin security model, and they're also not regulated as banks. So they fall into this gray area where they lack sufficient oversight and controls. Bitcoin isn't securing them, traditional banking regulations are not covering them, and very often we see fraud in those cases. So I think that is a significant risk.
Well, then comes the next question, of course. What the differences are between the various altcoins and blockchains when looking at the relationship between various stakeholders, including miners, wallet services, users, traders, and speculators, investors in assets, and the exchange of value between these parties?
At the moment, most of the altcoins are really not that different from Bitcoin. And in fact, they represent a very, very small fraction of the value of Bitcoin in the marketplace. However, what Bitcoin has done is it has created the possibility of any individual being able to design and launch a global, unforgeable, instantaneous, and secure currency. The ability to create powerful, secure currencies on a worldwide basis in the hands of an individual changes the fundamental relationship between currencies. So what I would expect to see is that we're going to have a lot more currencies in the future. And so this is the democratization of currency creation, which you can see as a good thing or a bad thing, depending on your perspective. Most of these currencies will have very little value. Some of them, however, will have surprising success. And so really fundamentally what has changed is that it is no longer governments that have monopoly over the creation of currency. Any person anywhere can create a currency, and if that currency is widely adopted, then it will be valuable.
Okay. We have number 6, I think. That's you.
So hey Andreas, this is Robbie.
No problem.
Yeah. Well, we just talked about the investors, the miners, and the wallet services. What other types of stakeholders do you expect to arise in the future?
It's very difficult to tell right now because even in the mining space, for example, we're seeing that split into a number of different layers. So new industries are emerging within that. We see the mining service or the mining industry used to be fairly homogeneous. Now we see companies that offer hardware. So hardware manufacturers. We see companies that buy that hardware and deploy it in very large locations, for example, mining farms that have primary hashing power. We see the organization of mining into syndicates or pools with mining pools. And we also see companies that are leasing out mining hashing power, which either they own in the form of hardware or they buy or rent from others and then resell it as an investment scheme. So already, just in the space of mining, that industry has separated into 4 distinct layers with independent markets in there that are trading both hashing power today and in some cases even hashing futures for tomorrow. So it's very difficult to see who the stakeholders will be in the future. And I would expect that, among other things, we will start seeing banking companies or financial services companies, large banks, consumer banks, investment banks, brokerage houses, and various other financial services organizations, for example, insurance companies, will start using blockchain technologies or Bitcoin directly in various ways.
Okay, thank you. I'll hand you back to Richard.
Andreas, how can the stakeholders mentioned be comparable to parties in traditional financial markets? For example, banks, consumers, regulators, investors, exchanges, brokers, and so on.
Well, that's what's interesting. They're not comparable. One of the fundamental impacts that Bitcoin has is that it changes some fundamental classifications and constructs within financial services. A lot of the classifications and constructs in financial services are the result of either regulations or constraints on activity or natural monopolistic tendencies that occur within these industries. So companies will organize around certain constraints, for example, and have strict delineation. Financial services networks are quite fragmented at the moment. So, for example, there are payment networks that are used for payments between countries. There are payment networks used for very large amounts. There are payment networks used for consumers. There are payment networks used for business to business. There are payment networks used for very small amounts. And all of these are very distinct payment networks. And around these distinct payment networks, you have these coalitions and collections of companies forming various industry subsectors. All of these are really artificial distinctions, and they occur because of limitations in the underlying payment infrastructure. Bitcoin flattens all of that. It blurs the lines between institutions. It blurs the lines on many of the traditional concepts. So a good way to make the analogy is, in the era of the internet, how do you define the word journalist? And it's very difficult to say, what is a journalist? What is a publisher? What is a creator? What is a consumer? All of these things are blurred because consumers can be simultaneously journalists and publishers. And to be a publisher doesn't mean much other than the act of publishing. And so traditional classifications and institutions that grew around these very, very restricted functions have now been flattened by the internet. Well, the same thing is happening with Bitcoin. What does it mean to be a bank? What does it mean to be a broker? What does it mean to be a producer, consumer, business? What does it mean to be a custodian? What is the meaning of the word payment or transaction? All of these things are being redefined because the underlying payments network flattens and removes many of these distinctions. And so the existing stakeholders are going to find themselves adapting to this new environment. Some big chunks of industry may in fact be redefined. A lot of intermediary functions are no longer necessary, can be replaced by networks. For example, clearinghouses and counterparty institutions in the age of Bitcoin are about as relevant as travel agencies or real estate brokers are in the age of the internet. These industries disappeared in many areas because of the internet, and something very similar is going to happen to banking. But at the same time, new industries will emerge to offer new types of services that didn't exist before. It's very difficult at the moment to predict what impact this technology will have, but it certainly redefines some very fundamental concepts around the custody, control, and transmission of money that can no longer be defined in simple terms.
Hi, I'm Alwyn Romein, board member of the Dutch Bitcoin Foundation, and I have a question regarding investments. And it's about what are the advantages and disadvantages of making investments in crypto tokens instead of traditional investments?
I think that using crypto tokens as an asset class or an investment is extremely risky. And I'm not sure that there are benefits at the moment. Even Bitcoin, which is the most stable of the crypto tokens, has extremely large volatility. More broadly, however, these are not assets in the traditional asset class scenarios. Bitcoin, what is Bitcoin? Is Bitcoin a currency? Is it a stock? Is it an exchange traded fund? Is it an index fund? Is it a bond? Is it a sovereign fund? Is it a commodity? Well, the answer is that Bitcoin is simultaneously none of those things and all of those things. It behaves like a currency, it behaves like a stock, a sovereign fund, an index fund, a commodity, an asset class of its own. The asset class of Bitcoin is cryptocurrency. It is a new asset class that has characteristics of stocks, bonds, currencies, funds, and commodities. And so traditional investment strategies are fraught with risk when applied to an asset class that has unique characteristics that have never been seen before and behaves in ways that we do not anticipate. Investors who are involved in investing in crypto tokens must account for not just exchange rate fluctuations, but also industry segment fluctuations, fluctuations in consumer adoption, supply and demand, but also the industrial capacity of mining, the internal dynamics of the mining difficulty and hash rate. And all of these parameters influence the market for cryptocurrencies in ways that we don't yet know how to analyze. So as a result, I would say crypto tokens themselves are a brand new area of investment which has to be approached with extreme caution by sophisticated investors who understand the kind of risk that they are engaging in. Rather, if you are an investor and you're interested in this new phenomenon of cryptocurrencies, I would consider the most important areas to invest in are pure technology innovation, startups, product development, and service development, not the cryptocurrencies themselves. Cryptocurrencies are a vehicle. The technology and the companies that come out of this create real jobs, real products, real services, and those are areas where people should invest. Which means that at the moment, this space of Bitcoin and other crypto tokens is really an area for venture capital investment and not for the kind of market-based speculation that we see. If you'll excuse me for just 1 minute before you ask me the next question, please.
So for those of you, excuse me, can I have your attention? Can I have your attention, please? Yes. Yes. So for those of you who have walked in a little bit later and kind of missed the beginning, we are planning on conducting these types of sessions, and in order to educate the public and ourselves, and to raise awareness. And what we're looking on behalf of Bitcoin Wednesday, as well as on behalf of the Dutch Bitcoin Foundation, the Stichting Bitcoin Nederland, we are looking for volunteers, people who have time and are interested in helping us, because we have a lot of work to do. As you can see, the type of change or the type of challenge that we face as a society in preparing for this transformation. Not only a transformation in technology, but also financial transformation, as well as social. There will be, dramatic social transformations that we will be experiencing. And in order to do that as a society, and in order for us to succeed in our ambition of positioning Amsterdam and the Netherlands as one of the key countries in the world for this, we have the opportunity to do that, but we need to work together. So if you have time to contribute to us as a volunteer, please do contact us. hello@bitcoinwednesday.com is a good email address. Otherwise, if you don't have so much time, but maybe have some additional funds that you can contribute, we certainly would accept that as well. So thanks very much. So thanks for coming back, Andreas.
Yeah, sorry for that slight interruption. Thank you.
Sure. What are the critical similarities and differences between the crypto tokens and the traditional financial instruments and financial organizations?
I would say there are more differences than there are similarities. A lot of the traditional financial instruments, which also affect the organization of industry and financial services companies around them, are really reflections of artificial constraints of geography and artificial constraints of transmission, communication, and the overheads and complexities of organization through intermediaries, meaning that we get financial services that are organized in a specific way because of the delays and difficulties imposed by the transmission of money instantaneously without intermediaries. Bitcoin has redefined that space by removing these constraints. And so to provide a common analogy to that, the reason we had the supremacy of very large publishers who controlled the dissemination of information and news through ownership of very large TV stations, printing presses, and distributions of newspapers was because the industry organized itself around the difficulty in transmitting and publishing information efficiently to many, many people. As long as that difficulty existed, as long as the cost of publishing to millions of people was very, very high, the industry would produce very large companies that filled that role. As soon as the internet removed that cost, it subverted the very fundamental structure and building blocks of that industry, and as a result, a blogger operating out of their house with a Twitter account or a video camera would immediately have the same reach as a national class newspaper, or even greater reach in some cases, And the same thing has happened across the news industry. The removal of costs, the removal of complexity, and the ability to make access to the same power of publication to an individual as a large company fundamentally transformed the industry. The same thing is happening with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. It allows an individual to operate as a bank. It allows an individual to have the same powers and capabilities as an international bank. An individual who can behave as if their desktop computer is a SWIFT terminal, a Bloomberg terminal, a stock market, a bank, a checking account, an ATM system, a Western Union terminal, and all of these things. This fundamentally transforms the industry, because the reason that financial services are organized in the way they are is because these things were not possible for individuals, and now they are.
Great. What is your view of how quickly adoption will spread, and to which new groups it will spread the most quickly?
I think it's easy to look at things in retrospect and feel that they're too slow, but then anticipate things in the future and then be surprised by how fast they are. So if we look back at the first 5 years of Bitcoin, to those of us who are in Bitcoin, the development of Bitcoin and adoption of Bitcoin may appear slow. But if you look at it objectively, it is absolutely staggering. It is breathtaking. The fact that basically a bunch of geeks can write some software and create an international currency that in 5 years is being discussed in every country in the world, is generating an enormous community, and just in the last year has attracted close to $500 million in investments as a technology sector. If you asked me in 2012, for example, or 2011, if I would expect that we would have seen this level of development in Bitcoin by now, I would probably have said no. So I think on the one hand, for those of us who are in this technology, things do not seem to be moving fast enough. But for the rest of the world, Bitcoin is a phenomenon that is exploding across the world and will have very far-reaching impact. It took about 20 years for the internet to go from a curiosity within a computer science lab limited to an academic environment until it had influenced many different aspects of life, and the vast majority of people in the developing world, at least, had a daily interaction with the internet. I think instead with Bitcoin, we're going to see that timeline compressed to less than 10 years total time. So we're already beginning to see Bitcoin evolve much faster than people expect.
Andreas, what are the advantages and risks compared to making investments and using crypto tokens compared to the traditional financial system as a whole? So earlier, Alwyn asked that question specifically compared to financial instruments, but now compared to the traditional financial system. What would you say are the advantages and the risks?
As I said, I think that the crypto tokens at the moment are tiny. They represent a very small liquidity pool, as we would call it in investment terms. And what that means is that they are subject to great and sudden variation and volatility, which makes them extremely risky as an investment vehicle. On the other hand, these tokens represent markets that are in some ways predictable. We can estimate the release of crypto tokens. We know how many Bitcoins will be available on the market today and how many of Bitcoins will be available in 100 years, and we can estimate that to a great degree of accuracy. Contrary to traditional investment thinking, I would say that some investors are probably concerned about the fact that we have no idea how many euros will be released in the next year. We have no idea what the strength of the euro will be, and we have no idea what the implications of issuing trillions and trillions of euros or dollars in debt by central banks will have on the economy. But certainly some economists believe that that's probably not a safe exercise, and that the current unprecedented currency wars that are occurring across the world are an extremely dangerous situation for the world economy as a whole. So it's really difficult to answer these questions without that context. I would say that at the moment, cryptocurrency should not be seen as an investment vehicle. I think the most important thing to do with cryptocurrencies is see how you can develop skills personally as an individual, learn about these things, and see how you can make them part of your life and use them in a practical way. I think for many people around the world, these currencies can offer immediate solutions to problems like sending money home to your family in another country. But I do not believe that they make for good investment vehicles.
Okay, then 2 more questions to go from the official channels. Do you have concrete suggestions on how governments and regulators can responsibly and efficiently approach the rise of this new technology? For example, what do you think of the suggestion that the government formalizes its intention not to add any new regulations or guidance with respect to crypto tokens for the next 5 years?
I think it's important to wait and see how this space is developing. Even the people who really understand how cryptocurrencies are working cannot really predict what kinds of applications will emerge in this space. And to make assumptions about what applications will emerge and create regulation for them would be a mistake at this point. I think formalizing an intent to provide safe haven environments, to create exceptions for small businesses, to create exceptions for startups that allow them to operate in this space, to experiment, to innovate, to generate jobs and innovation and research within the Netherlands would be a good idea. The important thing, I think, however, is to note this. You do not let the incumbent industry write the rules for the new industry. If we allow the banks, if politicians allow the banks to write the rules for cryptocurrencies, they will try to bury this innovation because it represents the first and most significant competitive threat the financial services industry has faced in the last 50 years. Consider what would have happened to if the phone companies had been allowed to write the regulations for the internet. I would be putting coins into the side of my computer right now to continue this video conference. So there are many entrenched interests which control the regulatory framework around financial services. Most of those entrenched interests represent the financial services industry, and they make the fundamental mistake of assuming that the economy is the financial services industry and the financial services industry is the economy. And so as a result, they will write rules that will attempt to completely stop any competitive threat from this emerging technology.
Okay, well then 1 more question and then we have public questions. I'll explain more about that later. Are there other people we should approach with these questions? Who would you recommend?
Oh, that's a good one. I have no idea how to answer that.
Okay, well that's clear. Thank you.
We can follow that up later, Andreas. No problem.
Thank you.
Well, then we go to the public questions. Maybe someone needs to have a sip of water first.
Run.
Yeah.
I do.
Oh, sorry. Here's the next question.
Hi, Andreas.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Roland de Goey from the Dutch Bitcoin news site bitcoinspot.nl. And in this country there has been a lot of focus on merchant acceptance of Bitcoin. Do you know why other countries have not focused on this as much as we have, on the Bitcoin merchant adoption part? And what is your opinion on the importance of merchant adoption and its effects on Bitcoin becoming mainstream?
I think merchant adoption is good because it makes it easier for people in the developed world to adopt Bitcoin and find places to spend Bitcoin. However, I don't think it's the most compelling application of Bitcoin technology. Being able to buy goods online is probably a better application of Bitcoin than making sure that your local coffee shop or pizza shop will take Bitcoin to sell you goods and services. However, from a marketing and popularity perspective, if you get Bitcoin or buy Bitcoin and you need to spend it, finding shops near you will make that easier. And if you see shops that take Bitcoin, that will increase your interest in this emerging phenomenon. It gives people more opportunity to experience this in their everyday life, to see other people using the currency and technology themselves.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
Hello, Andreas. Thank you for being here. My question
Hello.
is, for all of your work as well. My question is, what do you think about the efficiency of networks and efficiency of hierarchies, especially in the long term, in the context of increasing entropy, second law of thermodynamics?
Yes. Hierarchies are more efficient. Hierarchies can deliver the same service at a much lower cost. All you have to do is trust someone else with the control and power that they get through the hierarchy. It's just a minor inconvenience. You trust people with the power of money, and sometimes they turn into tyrants. So efficiency is a great phenomenon, but it creates tyrants. And I would rather have a system that appears at least to be less efficient, but diffuses power among many participants and doesn't allow the concentration of power, which leads to abuse of power and corruption by those who have it.
I totally agree. I think even the abuse of that is working against the efficiency of the system. Would be the
Not for those in power.
yeah.
Works very well for them.
Yeah, true. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you. Tim?
I am Tim Pastoor, co-founder of Identify. I believe you've heard of me before.
Yes.
My question is, you've stated earlier that the decentralized character of Bitcoin distributes risk and that that's a good thing, to which I agree. But isn't it at the same time creating new forms of risk, since doing business instantaneously with anyone, anywhere in the world also makes it harder to find out which of these parties you can trust? It seems like we can't solve something as subjective as trust among people with Nakamoto consensus, in which all parties agree on a party being trustworthy or not. So how do you see this issue being solved in the future?
You're absolutely right that it introduces different types of risk. And part of the non-reversible transaction nature of Bitcoin at first appears to make those risks worse. However, this is a form of programmable money. And through programmable money, you can implement things such as automated escrow, time delay transactions, and consensus mechanisms through multisig. All of these really offer interesting and innovative solutions to the various issues of consumer protection and trust across distance. But most importantly, they offer solutions to this that remain decentralized and keep the power and control over money in the hands of the individual, rather than centralizing that control and power into institutions. Institutions that at first promise to solve issues of consumer protection and then eventually end up serving only their own interests.
Okay, thank you.
Hi,
Kalispera, Andreas.
Kalispera.
I'm Hendrik Hilballing from The Hague, and I've been a co-founder of the Bitcoin Boulevard. I have a question for you. Could the government use public keys and set them fixed so that you can have a transparent following of the budget spending?
Yes, but they could also publish their financial accounts transparently today. They could publish the statements of the bank accounts. That is not an issue of technology. It's an issue of transparency in government. And for a variety of reasons, governments choose not to be transparent. So giving them the ability to do that with a cryptocurrency doesn't make it any more likely that they will do that than they can today. I'm sure most municipal organizations and governments receive a statement from their bank on their various operating and treasury accounts in the form of a PDF. If they wanted to, they could publish that.
I have one more question. It's with concern to ATMs. In The Hague, we have also a two-way system. So you can put euros in and you get bitcoins out, or the reverse side. Now, this engine uses a lot of authentication and identification tools. What do you think about that?
I think it's a waste of time.
Great.
And also it promotes an attitude that says that financial totalitarian surveillance is okay. Somehow we accept a level of surveillance in our financial lives that we wouldn't accept in any other aspect of our life, and that's somehow assumed to be okay. The justification for all of this, of course, is that it's going to stop crime or stop terrorists or stop drug dealing or things like that. The truth, of course, is that terrorists use bank wire transfers in US dollars in cash. And none of these techniques have ever been effective at stopping crime or any of the other things. What they are very effective at is destroying the privacy of individuals and giving enormous and unaccountable power to governments that can then abuse it. I don't believe in know your customer rules, or KYC as they're called. I believe in know your banker rules, or KYB as I call it. Know your banker, because your banker is probably financing warlords and probably financing drone bombings and other activities that would be considered terrorist, except that our government is doing them.
Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. Καλή νύχτα.
Ευχαριστώ.
Andreas, I have a personal question for you, one that's personal for me. One of the things I've been thinking as a board member and organizing the Bitcoin Wednesday is that because of the potential impact of this technology, historical impact, because of its economic potential and its potential for innovation and for societal, social transformation, and so on, and because it simply raises some of the very interesting, essential questions about the world we live in, the financial world or government and so on, wouldn't it be, what do you think of the possible idea of calling for an international moratorium on regulations or new regulations on this technology, so that we can take the time to have more of these types of informational sessions, so that we can better, as a society, better understand what it is that we're working with? What do you think about declaring or calling for that type of moratorium?
I think it's a fantastic idea to call for such a moratorium. I think it's a great idea to demand that politicians represent the interests of our constituents. The truth, however, is that they don't. And the reason they will not offer you a moratorium on regulation is because they don't work for you. In most cases, they work for the banks. And so that is the reality in most countries in the world, is that your voice doesn't matter. Because you're not going to be funding the re-election of a politician anytime soon, and they know exactly who's paying their bills. So a regulation moratorium would be nice, but in the meantime, the most important thing we can do with these systems is make them useful for more people around the world, so that people can use them day to day and use them to control their own future and their own destiny with these incredibly disruptive technologies. We didn't ask for anyone's permission, and we're not asking now.
Thanks, Andreas. Can I see, just for my own curiosity, a quick show of hands for the people that might support such a moratorium or put their name to it. Thanks very much. Is Ivan or Andrea here? I know I spoke with Ivan. Please come and ask your question.
Hello, my name is Ivan, and I guess from a beginner's viewpoint, I would like to ask: do you ever see Bitcoin becoming as common as everyday cash, or will it still be in the realm of having various other advantages as cheaper fees compared to Visa or PayPal? Or I guess a question before I can ask this question is, do you see in the near future the volatility of Bitcoin decreasing and as the infrastructure grows?
I think what's more likely is that cash will disappear. Cash is already disappearing in most developed worlds. Unfortunately, what's replacing cash today is a network of payment systems that have a very high degree of surveillance built into them, which is a very dangerous situation. I think, in fact, Bitcoin will become a system of payment that is extremely widespread. And that will mostly be through the influence of a new generation that grows up with the ability to use technologies like Bitcoin from a very early stage in their life. Let me ask you a quick question. What is the age at which you can open a bank account in the Netherlands?
It's a good question. Even I don't
12 or something?
In most countries, it's 12, maybe 16, maybe 18 in some. Here's the interesting thing. We've already heard from people who participate in some of these online communities who say that they have had a cryptocurrency account for 4 years, but have only been able to have a bank account for 1 year. Imagine a generation of young people who grow up and have access to cryptocurrencies from the age they're 5, when they first go to a primary school and start using cryptocurrencies among themselves. And then at some point later on in their life, at 12 or 16 years old, they're introduced to a technology that appears as antiquated, as baroque, and ridiculous as a fax machine or telegram appear to us today. And they will have already lived their entire life steeped in digital currencies, and then their bank will ask them for an ID and will give them a checkbook so they can write paper checks. And they will then go and have to ask their grandmother what a paper check is.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna turn the computer a bit so you can see who you're talking to.
Fine.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
So,
Andrea has the next question.
Andrea, please.
Hello, Andreas. I'm Andrea. And
Hello.
I'd like to know your opinion. I'm afraid I have a very technical question, but I'd like to know your opinion about the replace fee patch proposed by one of the Bitcoin developers, and possibly also the Bitcoin core development model, like a brief introduction. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of replace by fee. I think it leads to far more disruption than is worth. I think it's provocative, which is not surprising. Peter tends to make his points through provocation, and that's okay. We need that as part of the core development group. It's always good to have that kind of diversity of opinion. In this particular case, I think it would be a destabilizing factor. I'm very interested, and I think as a much better solution, an alternative approach called child pays for parent. So the child pays for parent approach is where a miner will allow the mining of a transaction that creates a chain that pays in the child transaction for the parent. Let's say, for example, you make a transaction from wallet A to wallet B, and you don't pay sufficient fee. And that transaction is stuck in the memory pool, and it's not being processed by the network. Now, you could make a second transaction from wallet B to wallet C, or from wallet B back to itself, that depends on the original transaction. And that second transaction has sufficient fee to cover both. So the child transaction essentially is paying for the parent. Now, a miner that is enabled this capability would mine both transactions because the aggregate fee is sufficient to make them happen. And that gives you a mechanism by which you can create a subsequent transaction to push through a transaction that didn't work previously. So there are some interesting ways to solve problems similar to the problem that is supposedly solved with the replace by fee without causing disruption to the network. I think it's really important that zero confirmation transactions continue to work. And at the moment, the approach of the network where the first transaction that is valid and seen by the network overrides subsequent transactions provides some measure of protection against double spend on zero confirmation transactions. Essentially, a merchant that is paying attention to the propagation characteristics of the network can see within a matter of seconds if a double spend transaction that might disrupt their original payment is propagating on the network and alert that something is wrong. And that can actually significantly increase the security of zero confirmation transaction. I think zero confirmation transaction for small amounts and for products or services that are delivered instantaneously is probably something we need in the network to make it useful. If you buy a cup of coffee at a coffee shop, you can't wait 10 minutes for confirmation. But with a fair degree of security in zero confirmation transactions, you will know within maybe 5 to 6 seconds if that transaction is safe or not.
Thank you.
So before we open up the floor to more spontaneous questions, are there any journalists or media members of the press that would like to especially ask any questions to Andreas? We'd like to make sure they have.
Journalists?
We'd like to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to do that. None. That's very interesting. I wonder why that is.
I couldn't tell. Well, anyway, I'm wondering who has some questions to ask Andreas. Please come forward, because of then he can see you too.
Please walk this way and carefully around the camera.
Hi, my name is Javier. And
Hello, Javier.
yes, I'm pleased to see you live. I've been hearing lots of you and videos and many things about you. There's something that we haven't really talked, and it's about price. And well, I think it's very important, and I haven't really understood how the price has evolved from the beginning, like from a few cents to $1 to 10 to 100 and even to thousands, and now it's like 300 or so. And what does it reflect on the history of the Bitcoin?
It doesn't reflect much. A lot of the speculation around Bitcoin is driving the price rather than any fundamentals. So you've got to realize that the investment environment around Bitcoin consists of a lot of people who are looking at lines on the chart and saying, well, if this line goes over that line, then I'm going to sell. And if that line goes under that line, then I'm going to buy. And what they're doing is they're playing this game with all of the other people who are trying to read the lines. And they're reacting to other people's behavior based on what they see on the chart, which is reflecting what other people are seeing on the chart, which is reflecting what other people are seeing on the chart. The very rude way of calling that in the US is a circle jerk. That's what it's reflecting. It's reflecting idle speculation, people treating Bitcoin as a get-rich-quick casino gambling thing. Of course, among those, there are sophisticated investors, and there are some important signals that are coming through. Let's look at some of the important signals. At the moment, there are 3,600 Bitcoin created every single day. At the current price, that represents, what, maybe $6 million? I'm not doing the math correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong. But so the thing is that if adoption on a global basis is more than that amount of $3,600, then the price will go up. Because you've got to realize that when miners generate 3,600 Bitcoin, they do that by spending a lot of money on electricity. They need to pay that electricity, and they pay that electricity in US dollars, in yuan, and in euros. So they must sell their Bitcoin as quickly as possible. That means that every single day, the vast majority of 3,600 new Bitcoin will be sold on the market in order to pay for electricity. And if there are less than 3,600 Bitcoin being bought by new users who are entering the space or investing in this space, that will drive the price down. And at the moment, it's simply the case that there are fewer people entering the market, and there's less than 3,600 Bitcoin demand in the space. And as a result, the price is suffering downward pressure a lot of the time. Now, keep in mind that in 2016, next year, the reward will fall by 50%. That means that only 1,800 Bitcoin will be created every day. And if only 1,800 Bitcoin are created every day, and the demand and price are more or less the same as they are today, that would create enormous upward pressure as more buyers than sellers exist, which theoretically at the same level of equilibrium would lead to a doubling in the price of Bitcoin. So if the reward is halved, the exchange rate price should double. But a lot of that will be hidden by the noise in the market that's caused by speculation, essentially by chart reading, by various people who are using Bitcoin as a gambling instrument. Somewhere in there, there's a signal, but it's sometimes difficult to see it through the noise.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Our next question comes from...
Hello, I'm Wojtek. I asked you about the efficiency in networks before, but
yes.
This time I'm wondering if you're familiar with the earliest history of money and how it can relate to Bitcoin. What I mean here that it wasn't really barter anywhere. People before they grew to bigger communities, they just simply remembered what happened between them, and I see it relating to Bitcoin by Bitcoin making it just global, simply remembering what happened, and that's why we don't need the physicality of it, because it's the function is done. What do you think about this?
Yeah, that's a very good observation. In fact, the earliest forms of money were not barter or tokens, they were ledgers.
Yes.
So
yes.
Whether that's tally sticks or writing on a piece of papyrus how many goats so-and-so gave so-and-so, that is a ledger. What Bitcoin does is it introduces a form of decentralized ledger that doesn't give the power of control over the ledger to a single individual or organization, and it makes it instantaneous and global. So it's bringing us back. The most futuristic form of money we have is an echo of the most original and ancient form of money we have. Money used to be a community and society activity, a language of transaction between individuals, not something designed by kings and governments. The idea that money exists only as a monopoly of governments with 194 currencies defined strictly by arbitrary lines written on a map and geographical constraints of borders is an absurdity that has existed for a few hundred years and will probably disappear in the future.
Yeah, thanks. Great. I think
Thank
also
you.
gold was chosen for this ledger because it was also decentralized. It's not electronic, doesn't teleport, but it's still decentralized ledger which no one can manipulate by creating more of it.
Well, it's interesting that the first form of metal money is actually silver, and it was developed in Western Turkey.
Okay.
And around the same time, 6 to 700 BC, around the same time that democracy flourished in Greece, the first forms of metallic money were being minted in Western Turkey. It's all part of the same origins of civilization.
Yeah, thanks. Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now from Toronto, I'm probably going to say your name wrong, so please introduce yourself.
Hi, Andreas. My name is Agisan Sri. I'm visiting here from Toronto. Great to see a lot of people here. I'm very surprised by the turnout. You mentioned earlier how Bitcoin is evolving much faster than much other technologies, so about 4 to 5 times faster. Last year, you mentioned that cryptocurrencies are like a language, and there's going to be millions of cryptocurrencies. About a year later, you talked about unified currencies. With the advent of side chains and what's happening right now, do you think that unified currency might be Bitcoin?
I think a unified store of value may be based on Bitcoin or as a derivative of Bitcoin. That doesn't change the idea that there will probably be, and I didn't say millions of currencies. I think what I said specifically was thousands, tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds or even millions. So that was the far edge of the speculation. I think it's safe to say that thousands of currencies is already on the near horizon. We're at 750 known and registered altcoins at the moment. So I think it's a safe assumption that thousands of currencies is well within the realm of possibility. And I think 10,000 currencies is not far off. Sidechains and other technologies like that provide a common grounding, an anchor of value that allows you to solve the fundamental dilemma, which is that until a currency is successful and has value, it is vulnerable to security attack, and it cannot acquire value if people are attacking it. So the ability to bootstrap a currency at a time when it is most vulnerable and doesn't have value, when you're trying to reward the miners who are securing that currency in a currency that is worthless, is a very difficult problem to solve. And the only reason Bitcoin solved it is because it's remained in obscurity long enough that by the time it had value, no one had yet noticed that it was worth attacking. And that only happens once or twice in history. It's unlikely that it will happen in exactly that way again. Now, when people anticipate that new currencies will have value, they may start attacking them much earlier. So the biggest problem with launching a new currency is that if it acquires value, it's subject to attack. You solve that by using the underlying security of Bitcoin to basically give value to new currencies that offer new features, capabilities, or innovations that are not possible within Bitcoin. I think that will lead to an explosion of innovation. It will lead to even more development in this ecosystem of currencies, an evolutionary environment that has a moment of rapid mutation and evolution because of the ability to have a common value core. So yes, we will see the acceleration of innovation in currencies because of these new technologies.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next question.
My name is Otto de Voogd. I came to the Netherlands because the country where I used to live was not very friendly towards Bitcoins. In fact, it was rather restrictive. You might know about it, I don't know, it's Estonia. I would be very interested to know what you would tell the government of Estonia about the consequences of their attitude towards Bitcoin.
Well, the consequences are standing right in front of me here on camera. The kind of people who can and choose to leave a country are the kind of people you want to keep inside the country. The kind of people who are willing to take risks who have the means and the courage to change their life's trajectory because of a decision or a principle. Those are the kinds of people you want to keep in your country, generating jobs rather than alienating them and sending them somewhere else, sending them to a more open society that is willing to bring people from around the world together under a common cause, or to create a more fertile environment for experimentation and innovation, research and development. In Bitcoin, as in many things today on the internet, there are no borders. And so the only thing you can do is deprive your own citizens of opportunity. Because if they can, they will leave. And the companies that are involved in the space can and do leave. And they'll take their jobs with them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Robbie or Job? Job, please.
Hi, Andreas. First, congratulations on your new company. And can you tell a bit more about what you're going to do and how important it is right now in industry?
Oh, thank you so much. So for those who haven't heard, yesterday I launched a company called Third Key Solutions. Our CEO, Pamela Morgan, myself, and Richard Kagan, a business advisor, together launched this company. If you've looked at the Bitcoin space, you know that one of the big challenges we have is security, especially security of accounts managed by startups or companies in the Bitcoin space. For most companies, it's very difficult to secure large amounts of Bitcoin. It's a complex technical issue, but it's also very difficult from an organizational, operational, and people perspective. The very same tools that people use to secure Bitcoin make them vulnerable to loss. It's like taking the most valuable thing and then trying to bury it somewhere in your garden. If you do it very well, you forget where you buried it and then you've lost it. The same thing occurs with Bitcoin. If you do all of the encryption very well, you run the risk of losing the very passwords that you've used to encrypt your Bitcoin, and then you've lost your Bitcoin. We have technologies to solve this, technologies like multi-signature. But these technologies also require operational process. So the company I founded is a company that advises Bitcoin startups how to develop organizational programs for protecting and securing their Bitcoin using multi-signature. And as part of that, we will generate, store, and hold a key as part of a multi-signature plan. If the company has a problem with one of its existing keys, then we can provide a signature to do recovery of funds. So that's a solution that we're now offering. It involves a good understanding of operational security. It's not just about the technology. And so we launched that company yesterday.
Thank you. Well, applause is good. I was looking at the Twitter feed. Robbie.
Well, Andreas, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. I'm a board member of the Dutch Stichting Bitcoin Nederland, which is the sort of Dutch Bitcoin Foundation. And this may not completely be your field, but I know you have experience talking to other Bitcoin-related organizations. And we were wondering what you think would be a good role or good things to do for the Dutch Stichting, so for the Dutch Foundation. We usually hold forums here where we hold polls and then we ask what people want us to do. The current top 3 is support startups with legal help, funding, etc. Then support non-financial applications of Bitcoin, and enabling bank accounts for Bitcoin companies and users. So those are the 3 things we're focusing on right now. But what do you think that we should do? Is this something you want to answer or can answer?
I think probably the most useful thing an organization like yours can do is create education initiatives within the space. So one of the organizations that I started in San Francisco was the San Francisco Bitcoin Developers Group. And this is an organization for developers, helping software developers train each other and teach each other how to use digital currencies, cryptocurrencies, decentralized currencies. So how to program the blockchain. This organization creates basically a community of skilled people who can help each other and promote each other, and also allows local companies to get the one thing that they find most difficult, and that's not legal advice and it's not funding, it's skilled employees. So creating programs of education that can help the local technology industry develop skills in blockchain to create a pool of talent that startups in the space can easily access, I think is probably the biggest impact you can bring.
Okay, thank you.
Next one is Kirill.
Hi Andreas, I want to ask you about inflation. It's a huge factor in today's economy, and every day people create more and more value since we get more and more effective. So why would I spend my bitcoins today if tomorrow they're going to be more valuable?
Well, you spend your Bitcoin today because you need to buy something.
Yeah, definitely, but
so
I mean,
you would spend your Bitcoin to either because you need to buy something, food, shelter, healthcare, education.
Right.
Or you would spend your Bitcoin today because you believe that the area that you invest in, if you invest your Bitcoin, will generate a greater return than simply sitting on that Bitcoin. And what that will do is it will encourage very basic consumption based on needs and investment in productive opportunities, rather than with money that is becoming worthless faster than you can hold it. It creates opportunities and the incentives to spend on useless plastic crap that nobody needs to fill your house. And then when your house is full, you get a bigger house and you spend more money on that. And then as soon as you have the bigger house, you start filling it with plastic crap again.
Yeah.
And the cycle continues. Most of Western society is caught in this cycle of endless, pointless consumption and trying to find ways to protect the value of their money rather than looking for opportunities to invest in things that have an actual return.
Mm.
So what we in the West call hoarding, most of the rest of the world calls sensible saving. And since I started using Bitcoin, I found myself doing a lot more sensible saving. I don't think that's a bad thing.
And do you also think that people will own more real value, not just coins in their pocket?
Well, yeah, I think that if you hold coins and you don't invest them, they may gain some value, but they won't do anything for you beyond that. And so, if you have some assets, the form of some savings, then you can put your money to work for you. And you don't have to be a labor slave, essentially, where every hour of your life is the only productive asset that you can give society. You can use your mind to decide which investments are good and then put your money to work, essentially investing in productive opportunities that make things better for society. But in order to do that, your money has to be worth something. And if your money is becoming worthless over time, then what you want to do is get rid of it as quickly as possible and replace it with something that will hold value longer. I was recently paid for an engagement I did in Germany, and I quoted them in US dollars, and I was paid in euros. And in the 2 weeks that the wire transfer took to transmit across the Atlantic, because as you know, the way the Bundesbank does wire transfers apparently is by steamboat, because it took 16 days to get to my bank in the US. In the age of the internet, it was slower than a telegram. And in that time, the euro dropped 15%. And at that point, I realized that Bitcoin volatility wasn't so bad after all.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. We have time for about 3 or 4 more questions. Please, Rogier, the first. He has 2 questions, one from a friend as well. So.
Hi, Andreas. I'm Roger from Bitkassa and co-organizer of Arnhem Bitcoin City. I still remember the time where there were hardly any places where you can spend your Bitcoins. And I'm a big advocate of Bitcoin and always promoting it to anyone who wants to hear about it. We've been putting a lot of effort in getting more and more Bitcoin acceptance to quite some degree of success, especially in Arnhem. And nowadays, more and more often, I'm getting the question from end users or consumers who are not into Bitcoin at all yet, saying, well, you know, this fancy Bitcoin stuff, I'm sure it's all cool, but what's in it for me? Why should I start with this? What's the advantage? I'm curious to hear your take on this, especially considering the perspective of a Western consumer who has already excellent banking facilities.
Well, it's a very difficult question to answer. There really is no fundamental benefits if you're going to use Bitcoin purely to replace Visa payments or to do everything that you were going to do in euros. Because, you know, for most consumers today, the euro works quite well, and Visa works quite well. Why would you use this complex new technology? I remember a time when there were only 2 websites. 2. I visited both of them the first day I used a browser. And that was it. There were only 2 websites. And at that time, a lot of people might ask, why would I use the web? I mean, there's only 2 websites. What am I going to do with them? I'm not into physics. I'm not interested in either of the 2 existing websites. The world changes much faster than we expect. For most Westerners, what we need to think about is applications that cannot be done with today's software and today's money. So if you're a sophisticated user, are there services on the internet that you can only buy with Bitcoin? Are there things that you can do on the internet that you can only do with Bitcoin? And we see a few of those applications already. But they're not very mainstream, they're not very important yet, and they're not the kinds of applications that would make people consider using Bitcoin. For example, I can tip people on Twitter with ChangeTip or other tipping platforms. I can't do that with traditional money. I can send money to another country, and I can do that almost instantaneously. I can't do that with traditional forms of money. Now, if I could pay a YouTube creator to watch a video, or if I could pay to read an article and pay 2 cents or 5 cents, then that would be an activity that I simply can't do with traditional payments mechanism. So what we need to do is think about what applications can we build that can be done with today's money. And then while you're thinking about that, the other part of the question, which your friend is asking, why should I be using Bitcoin instead of the euro?
Well,
will be answered by the European Central Bank. They will help you answer that question by destroying the euro.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And then your friend will have a reason.
Well, his other question was, it's from my friend and colleague Patrick, who cannot be here today. He says, you claim you get most of your income paid in Bitcoins, yet you aren't too enthusiastic about paying with Bitcoin on the street. This means you must be converting at least part of your income back to fiat money every month. How do you expect Bitcoin to become a major player in the remittance markets when, for example, Filipinos cannot pay their groceries with Bitcoin, so they have to convert their Bitcoin immediately back to their local currency? Wouldn't it be great if they could keep their money in Bitcoin and pay their expenses directly with Bitcoin, instead of having need to convert Bitcoin into fiat money as soon as they receive it?
Oh, I think that's a very valid point. It would be a lot better. But we're not competing with perfect. So we're competing with Western Union's 9% fees. And you can do a lot better than 9% even if you have to convert the money immediately. in most countries. And in some countries, it's even worse. In some countries, Western Union will charge up to 20, 25% once you include the exchange rates. Bitcoin can do this for 3% or less, even if you do exchange at both sides. And so we're not competing with perfect, and we don't need to be perfect. We just need to be good enough to make a significant impact in people's lives. And that's why people in the Philippines are using Bitcoin for remittances. Not a lot, but just a bit, but it's already happening. I get paid in Bitcoin. Honestly, I use Bitcoin to make larger purchases. I buy electronics, I pay suppliers, subcontractors, I buy hosting services, web services, domain services, and things like that. I don't use Bitcoin to buy my groceries or pay my rent. If my local grocery store did take Bitcoin, I would. And if I could get my landlord to take rent in Bitcoin, I would. But I don't think that's the killer application for Bitcoin. And I'm confident that over time, as adoption becomes greater, the simply lower cost of Bitcoin transactions and the efficiency which they can be done will make them the preferred choice, first for international payments, then for online commerce, and probably last, but equally important, in face-to-face merchant transactions.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you. Here we have Benno, who has a question on the blockchain. So, no Bitcoins for...
Hello, Andreas. Thanks for being here. I'm
Thank
Benno,
you.
and I have a question on the potential of the blockchain technology on other applications. And one of them I'm very interested is in voting, because it could make voting very transparent, fast and cheap. What is your vision and your opinion about voting with the blockchain technology?
I think there are some risks with trying to solve social problems with technology. And the real question we have to ask is, what is the problem we're trying to solve in voting? The truth and reality is that in most developed countries, there is very little voting fraud. And that the best mechanism for protecting against voting fraud is the decentralization of the election process itself, through controls that are dispersed from the local polling station, through the district stations, all the way up to national stations. And when elections are run in a way that the various parties have participants and observers distributed at the local, regional, and national level, and when the mechanisms for voting can be inspected openly, then voting fraud is extremely rare and extremely difficult to do, especially at a level that changes elections. From that perspective, the right security operations, together with the simple technology of paper and pencil, remain the most effective, most scalable, most secure voting mechanism ever. In fact, the biggest problems we've seen with voting fraud have occurred when we've tried to replace paper and pencil with machines and touch screens that cannot be inspected, that can be infected by viruses, that can be compromised by a single central location, and which cannot be audited in an effective manner at the local, regional, and national level. I am skeptical that blockchain technologies solve a real problem at the moment, when the vast majority of people do not have access to the technology to use these, and when the problems of voting fraud and corrupt elections occur primarily in countries with even less technology infrastructure and more rural populations, which could not benefit from such blockchain technologies. The truth is that in Western developed nations, the biggest problem facing voting is that your vote doesn't matter. At least in my country, I get to vote and I have two choices. I can vote for red Goldman Sachs, and I can vote for blue Goldman Sachs. And that's the choice. And that doesn't change the fundamental election technology. The reason people don't vote is because they feel that their voice doesn't matter. And the reason people feel that their voice doesn't matter is because it doesn't. And you don't solve that by changing the technology of elections. So I think that blockchain technology is promising in many areas, but for now, and for at least another decade, I don't really think that it makes any significant contribution to national elections. What's more interesting is to consider how you could use voting technology within the blockchain in order to change the fundamental governance model for corporations. So the ability to have registered shareholders use technology like the blockchain to conduct shareholder elections and decision-making, or in the case of distributed autonomous organizations, to effectively run a corporation without a board of directors, but in direct response to shareholder action. I think that's a really interesting area of technology.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, I think room for 2 more questions if we're quick. Hans?
Have you seen or heard of any developments or ideas to solve the problem of centralized exchanges like MTGov, for instance, or the problem with centralized exchanges?
I've seen many ideas. The problem of centralized exchanges occurs because of the difficulty transmitting traditional non-decentralized currencies. Non-decentralized currencies create essentially a nexus of centralization. When they touch Bitcoin, they create centralization by proximity. The reason you can't easily decentralize an exchange between a cryptocurrency and the traditional national currency is because the national currency is difficult to transport, is difficult to decentralize, is difficult to process without a clearinghouse, and because it is subject to manipulation, for example, a freezing of a bank account or confiscation or blocks in transmission. So the disadvantages of traditional national currencies cause the centralization of these exchanges. In fact, if you look at exchanges that operate directly between cryptocurrencies, we have several very effective decentralized exchanges for that. Shapeshift.io is a good example. It's a decentralized exchange that allows you to convert any cryptocurrency or most cryptocurrencies into another cryptocurrency in an atomic 2-party transaction without a centralized clearinghouse, without counterparty risk. And we can see even more decentralized versions of that. But we're never going to see a truly decentralized exchange on a large scale on currencies such as the euro and the dollar, and that's because of the euro and the dollar. What we will see is small-scale decentralized exchanges for cryptocurrencies, international currencies. Essentially, local Bitcoins, Mycelium Trader, and other person-to-person small value exchanges that allow people to quickly enter and exit the market, or bidirectional ATMs, spread by the tens of thousands all around the world that allow people to very easily exit and enter a cryptocurrency.
Great. Last question from Aaron.
Andreas.
Hello.
So, the development of Bitcoin right now is mostly run by about 5 guys who call all of the shots, the 5 core developers. They are funded by a small number of big companies or the Bitcoin Foundation, which is itself funded by a small group of big Bitcoin companies. So my question is, how decentralized do you think Bitcoin still is and will be in the future? And do you think it's a problem?
I don't think it's a problem. I think it's a misconception to think that Bitcoin development is really run by just 5 guys. The truth is that while 5 guys have commit access to the GitHub code, they have to consult with a much broader developer community that includes probably about 40 people who have various levels of influence in that community. And all they can do is create a new version of the code, and then they can release that version of the code. Now, at that point, whether that code actually gets used on the consensus network of Bitcoin depends on adoption of that code by miners, adoption of that code by merchant processors, by wallet companies, by all of the software startups in the space, and at the last extent by the users who download and implement each one of these versions of Bitcoin Core. So while nominally you could say that these 5 guys have power, If they try to do things without the consensus of the other 40 developers, they won't get a release published. And if they do get a release published with a consensus of 40 developers, but it violates the sensibilities of the miners, the merchants, the exchanges, the wallet companies, or a majority of the users, that version won't get adopted. So their control is actually rather tenuous. They have to seek consensus at every turn. And they have to seek consensus from a very large community that is expanding all the time with the addition of more and more developers in this space. And I think pretty soon what we'll see in Bitcoin is that they're going to have to seek consensus in Mandarin. Because, you know, that is where the direction of this currency will go. The average human being on this planet is a 23-year-old Han Chinese male who speaks Mandarin. It's not you, it's not me. And so if Bitcoin truly becomes a global currency, it will be in Chinese. And these core developers will have even less power in that environment. I'm not worried about Bitcoin decentralization. Perhaps it doesn't have the ideal level of decentralization that it had at inception. It still represents the most decentralized force in finance in the history of humanity that we have ever seen on this planet. At its absolute worst, most centralized version, Bitcoin is still more decentralized than Visa. So I think it is a power for decentralization. And if at some point in the future, Bitcoin becomes too decentralized for my taste, I and a lot of others will simply build more decentralized currency and we'll move to that. Bitcoin opens the door for continuous disruption of currency. It creates the possibility of desktop currency creation and desktop banking. And that means that once that door is open, if what we have is something we don't like, we'll replace it with something else. Bitcoin disrupts banking today. Tomorrow, maybe we disrupt Bitcoin.
Well, thank you. One final announcement from Robbie, and then we're going to close the connection before we upload, of course.
Well, I have the honors to thank you for being here with us. And we have a gift for you, which is kind of difficult to get to you from here, but we'll figure it out. This is a Raspberry Pi Model 2, the 1 gigabyte quad core. And it's actually the SD card on it makes it a full Bitcoin node if you make it accessible over the internet. So this will give you a full Bitcoin node for 5 watts of power, which is the equivalent of 3 cups of coffee if you pay for the power in the Netherlands for a year. This is a project that was actually asked for on Bitcoin Wednesday here. And well, we'll figure out how to get it to you if you want to pick it up sometime in Amsterdam or if we ship it to you. But yeah, for your time, thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Well, Andreas,
that's a
thank
really
you.
Exciting project. I'm glad to see that you've built a Bitcoin node. It's really important to continue to run as many Bitcoin nodes as possible. I currently run 3. I have 1 here at home, and I have 2 more running on servers that I use for various business activities. So I will be very glad to receive the Raspberry Pi and experiment with it and write articles about it. And then I will have 4. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. You have anything to add, or it was about 2 hours, so I guess.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I hope next time when I work with the Amsterdam community, it's going to be in person. I would love to visit you. And my very first question when I arrive in Amsterdam is, I have Bitcoin. Where can I buy stroopwafels for Bitcoin?
That's a good one.
We're working on that, Andreas.
Bitcoin Wednesday.